I'm Paul Levinson, and welcome to Light On, Light Through, episode 353, Robots Through the Ages, AI and Chat GPT. Well, I thought I'd start off the month of June with another visit to Captain Phil's Planet, which is actually a show on WUSB radio, in which Captain Phil plays music that has some connection to science fiction, does interviews connected to science fiction, and that's one of the reasons why I wind up there so often, including yesterday, in which we had a great conversation about robots through the ages. I think I told you a little bit about this anthology in the last episode of this podcast. It is just an unbelievable anthology about robots, that is stories, science fiction stories about robots, including by Ambrose Bierce from the year 1899, Philip K. Dick. I will include, of course, in the show notes a link to this anthology, and you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. I'm beyond flattered and happy and honored to be in this anthology along with those titans. And the anthology couldn't have come out at a better time as far as the public, the world, being more interested than ever about robots, artificial intelligence, and of course, this app that everyone is talking about, Chat GPT. So we're going to talk about all of that. And coming right up, here is the interview on Captain Phil's Planet with me that was conducted just yesterday afternoon.
The Light on Light Through podcast.
And you have landed on Captain Phil's Planet, and we are just about to get Paul Levinson on the air here. The new book is... the title is right in front of me. The new book is... I'm scrolling to figure it out. Live radio. Robots Through the Ages, a science fiction anthology edited by Robert Silverberg and Brian Thomas Schmidt. See how I did that? See how I did that? And joining me on the Zoom, he's just logging in right now, is my friend Paul Levinson. I see his handsome face right there. Welcome to WUSB Stony Brook, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing great. I always feel especially inspired when I'm on your planet, for sure.
And our planet is full of robots.
Well, hey, some of them are good, some of them not so good.
That is true. That is true. I did my Cylon station ID prior to you coming on, so that's a great example of very sexy, mean robots, right?
Absolutely. I'd love to meet some of them, but not hang around for too long.
Real quick, the actress who played number 6, the tall blonde, Trisha, I forget her last name, Alpha or something like that. She was at a comic book convention, she was at the Baltimore Comic-Con, and she was doing a Q&A, and she had like a person interviewing her, but we got to get up and ask questions. So I asked her, what was it like to climb all over Baltar while everyone else had to pretend you weren't there, slinking all over him? And she proceeded to stand up and do that exact same thing to the lucky man who was interviewing her on stage. I saw him later in the dealer's room, and he thanked me profusely.
Well, he was right to thank you. If I had known, I would probably have gone to that con myself.
Yes.
But,
if that was a yes.
Battlestar Galactica has really become a bedrock of our thinking of evil.
Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing, Paul? I mean, we are going to talk about robots through the ages, But there was one day when I woke up and I saw in my news feed that Battlestar Galactica had won the Hugo Award. And I said, what mad parallel universe has I fallen into where Battlestar Galactica, and of course it was the reboot, it was not the original. And I have much love for the original, but it was not Hugo Award worthy, in my opinion. But yeah, it was just amazing how it's informed us, and especially during the Bush era.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Look, it's become so important. I couldn't resist in my novelette, Robinson Calculator. That's one of the stories.
Yes,
I'm probably
she's
the least famous person, right? In Robots Through the Ages. But my android character, Leanne, pretty early on, at some point, tells the protagonist hero, he's asking, what have you been up to? And she said, well, I was just watching some Battlestar Galactica.
That's so funny, and what's weird, Paul, reading the story again and looking at the book after your radio play, okay, it's real life, where you played Pete Fornatel. I placed you in this story as the main character, and here you are, having sushi, making out, but I'm doing it in my head though, because of the radio play. It was you. It was the Paul Levinson that I know, not the character who was obviously in his 20s or 30s or whatever. And it was just like a weird imagery that was going on in my head. But Robinson,
it's not weird. Let me just say that first of all, just as a general principle of writing, you always write best when you're writing about something that you know best. And who do you know better than yourself? And as a matter of fact, I probably have told you this story before. My first novel, The Silk Code, that won the Locus Award for Best First Novel back in 1999, when it was still in manuscript form, my wife, Tina, was reading it and left it on the kitchen table. And our daughter, Molly, got up early the next morning. I think she was about maybe 12 years old, and then read through every page of it, and which was, by the way, slightly embarrassing for me, because the same kind of thing that you saw in Robinson Calculator, there's some of that in the Silk Code. And the first thing Molly says to me is, well, she said two things. First, she said, Dad, this is the best novel I've ever read. And I pleaded with Tor to put that on the back of the book. But she said, it's Phil D'Amato, the main character, he's just like you. So, she recognized that as well.
It's great. I love that. Did that blurb make the back cover, Paul?
No, it never did. You know how the publishing companies are. They never listen to you.
Yes.
You're lucky that they talk to you.
That's funny.
But they said, no, that's going a little too far. I said, look very. I could have even seen putting it on the front cover, the author's daughter.
Yes. Robots Through the Ages. When is this coming out?
It's coming out on July 25th, and it's been in preparation for a good couple of years. I mean, I was first contacted by Brian Thomas Schmidt, one of the co-editors. He and Robert Silverberg are the editors of the book. I don't know, about a good 2 or 3 years ago. And at that point, it wasn't even definite. He just said, hey, we're interested in publishing your story, Robinson Calculator, in this anthology, Robots Through the Ages. Would you be okay with that? And I said, absolutely. I'd be more than okay. I'd be thrilled with it. And then things, move very, very slowly. The publishing world, from the instant the contract is signed, usually if you're dealing with a big professional publisher, which this publisher is, it can take easily a year or two before it actually sees the light of day and publication. So I've been looking forward to this for a long time. And I have to tell you, I'm glad you mentioned It's Real Life, the radio play that you were good enough to play a couple of months ago, and we did a great interview on it. But this story, Robinson Calculator, and It's Real Life, basically burst into being and out into the public pretty much at the same time. So here, all these years after I first started publishing my novels and after I had all these stories in analog and so on, and obviously I'm still writing science fiction, but I'm doing lots of other things. Suddenly, in the last couple of years, these two projects have come together, and I'm really excited about this. And I can't tell you. I mean, you as someone who's a connoisseur of science fiction would appreciate this. Honored is not a strong enough word for how I feel about being included one of my stories in this anthology. First,
I'm going to jump in on that because okay, Robert Silverberg, but then your bookmates, Jack Williamson, Clifford Simek, Lester Del Rey, Fritz Leiber, Philip K. Dick, Avram Davidson, Roger Zelazny, Connie Willis. Whoa, it just goes on and on and on. Wow. Not to mention the less familiar names to me, more new people. Martin Shoemaker, Ken Scholes, Suzanne Palmer, Karen Harper. I think I sort of remember Karen Harper and Brenda Cooper. They're ringing a bell, but the Golden Age people, amazing stuff.
Yeah, these are the people I grew up reading as a kid. And, you mentioned Avram Davidson. I was immediately attracted to him because I recognized his Hebrew name. And I loved all of his work, including the Golem story that's in this anthology. And he was sadly no longer with us, so was a very original writer. And of course, when you're talking about androids and robots, you can't beat Philip K. Dick.
Yeah.
Probably the most important thing that Philip K. Dick did, I say just probably, not definitely, because, time is still going on and who knows what's going to happen. Probably at this point, The Alternate History Man in the High Castle is his most significant work. But certainly close behind that are his stories about artificial intelligence and robots and androids. And they are a classic Philip K. Dick genre, because what he was always interested in is, what does it mean to be human? And by thinking about what artificially created beings can do and can't do, are they good, are they bad, what that does is it holds up a mirror to what we as human beings do. And it's a great way to study human nature.
We're talking with Paul Levinson on Captain Phil's Planet on WUSB Stony Brook. The new anthology coming out in July is Robots Through the Ages, featuring Paul's story, Robinson Calculator, as well as classic science fiction. We've been talking a little bit about Philip K. Dick here. Paul, do you think Philip K. Dick is predicting the world we're living in now, or is the world trying to become what Philip K. Dick wrote about? There's a quandary for you.
Yeah, well, increasingly, it's the world is becoming what he wrote about. And I think, by the way, a lot of this concern about Chat GPT and artificial intelligence, I just saw a guy yesterday on Katie Tur, one of the many AI scientists and specialists who've been speaking out. And his point of view is we need to be at least as worried about artificial intelligence as we are, for example, about climate change. I think he's read too much Philip K. Dick, because at this point, at least in my humble opinion, first of all, to be clear, even he agrees we're not talking about the Terminator. We're not talking about any of these highly intelligent androids and robots you'll find in Robots Through the Ages. The concern about AI is this AI in machines. And the concern that he and a lot of people are expressing is somehow they might take over hospitals. God knows what they're going to do. But the truth of the matter is that is something that Philip K. Dick explored to some extent. And in reality, if you look at what the most that any AI has done so far, I guess it's a cleverly programmed series of bots on some system like Twitter, which can, for example, express the Russian point of view in their savage fascistic attack on Ukraine, and maybe influence some opinions. But actually, as you know from our previous discussions, and that's why, not to give too much away about anything, one of the things I love about robots through the ages is some of the robots and androids are good. They do good things. For example, you mentioned Martin Shoemaker's story. His story in Robots Through the Ages, again, without giving anything away, is a really heartwarming, soul-nurturing story. And even in Robinson Calculator, the calculators are not necessarily bad. They may not be completely good. But what I'm most interested in practically in AI is when I hear now that through AI, they can do like a brain scan and identify the propensity for developing some kind of brain tumor before it even actually emerges.
Well, yeah, that just broke the news. And because I've been very reluctant to talk about AI, because it's all over the news. And when people talk about it, I'm like, is that really what artificial intelligence means? Is this just like a clever marketing name, for it? It's kind of odd. It's kind of like an odd thing the way they're talking about it. And then no one ever really talks about, well, would they, like we always assign our human emotions, our human fears, it's basically it's like Morbius in Forbidden Planet, monsters from the id. We put, I don't see machines as having the same evil intent. They would just be cold and calculating, and why would we even play a part in that? I see it more as the artificial intelligence from the movie Her, that hangs out with her user for a while, and then she evolves beyond him, and everything's great. Nobody gets hurt. He just is lonely he was lonely from the beginning. He was still kind of lonely throughout, and then that was that, and she leaves.
Absolutely. Look, the main victims and the main casualties in the development of artificial intelligence and androids and robots who have something akin to human intelligence will probably be those very androids and robots. I actually wrote a piece back in the 1990s called The Civil Rights of Robots, in which I said if you develop a robot or android that has human-like intelligence, whatever exactly that might be, do we then have the right to order it around, or to flip back to Asimov, to program it so that it has no choice but to do what we tell it to do? And I think that's a philosophic issue that sooner or later will need to be confronted. And again, some of the stories in Robots Through the Ages address that issue. And one of the things I also love about the volume is in terms of time, I think the oldest story is the Ambrose Bierce story.
Yes.
Moxon, this chess. Moxon's Master was one of the titles of the story. The original title was slightly different, and that's the title in Robots Through the Ages. But, back in 1899, when Ambrose Bierce, who was primarily a horror writer, by the way, not even a science fiction writer, but when he wrote that story, it was eye-opening and thrilling and notable. But there you were dealing with a murderous android. And, most of the early stories were, in that perspective. But more recently, although people are still worried about, and I'm not saying we should totally ignore the possible problems of artificial intelligence and robots, but you find more ecumenical kinds of stories. And I actually think we have a perpetual paucity of intelligence in our world. We need more intelligence, not less.
Well, yeah, that's true. But I mean, thinking about Asimov's and the Law of Robotics, and basically Asimov is writing about mechanical slaves we created to do things, and looking over this anthology and thinking about this subject really made me think about America's original sin and slavery, and how what what the country really wants is just, a bunch of people to do stuff that we're unwilling to do, and to pay them nothing, or basically just maintenance. And I think that's a little bit of the dream behind robots. Like, the robot stories are coming out like 30, 40 years after the Civil War, and the same sort of fears are there. You think the robots we create are going to rise up against us the way we were afraid slaves were going to take up arms, or it was illegal to educate slaves, that sort of thing. And I was just thinking about parallels between the two. Do you think there's like some unwritten fear that we're assigning that, the rebellious slave narrative to these robot stories, in there?
Yes, absolutely, I do, because there's a fundamental paradox that existed both in slavery of humans and now in the hypothetical slavery or theoretical slavery of robots, because we don't yet have anything like really intelligent robots. And the paradox is, we want our servants to be as intelligent as possible so they can do their work better. In the case of robots, we want them to be able to do more and more. We want them to some extent to think for themselves. Let's just imagine a robot at home and there's some kind of problem going on, some kind of noise or whatever. We would like that robot to be proactive and do something about that. And not only that, not just do something, but do the right thing, to either call the right person or fix that problem him or herself, whatever, if the robot has agenda that robot might happen to be. But it's paradoxical because the more we want that level of intelligence, the wronger we are to order any being that intelligent around. In contrast, say, to a dog. Now, everyone agrees, I don't know if everyone agrees, but most, sane, decent people agree you shouldn't abuse dogs. But we expect, when we have dogs as pets, that they follow our orders. And, we value dogs because they do that. And when they don't do that, then we say, well, they need more training. And we value smarter dogs that can follow our orders better, and they're more subtle in terms of what they can do.
And service dogs, and what's the dog with the rum barrel around his neck? Who runs around in the forest? The Saint Bernard.
Saint Bernard, that's right. The Saint Bernard bounding through the blizzard.
Yes. To deliver alcohol to the frozen person, because that's what's going to save them, is alcohol.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
But so yes, it is a profound and fascinating paradox. And I always make this point that I didn't know Marvin Minsky, the late MIT AI scientist, too well, but I knew him, middling well. In fact, he was good enough to write a blurb on my first major nonfiction book, The Soft Edge: A Natural History and Future of the Information Revolution. And he basically, has, spent his life, studying AI and studying, robots. And his, main perspective on these robots is that we can continue developing them, and we don't have to worry about meeting this omega point where they take us over. And he talked about artificial intelligence and AI, but as something that was auxiliary, that naturally works, with humans, rather than something that's somehow going to go out on its own and do damage.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. I mean, the wants and desires of human beings, unless you're unless you're a calculator, seem to be not anywhere near what what robots want. There seems to be a very divergence. So the whole issue of the Terminator and Sarah Connor, that whole thing, the robots taking over, the whole idea of like, humanity is enslaved by robots, kind of like we kind of are enslaved by robots already. We carry around little phones in our pockets and we have to obey them every time they make noise. We put an alarm in our bedrooms that tell us when to wake up. So we do take orders from mechanical devices, but it's more or less, to enhance our lives. But I never see the whole issue where, well, all the robots are going to take over. I see it more as we're probably going to climate change ourselves out of existence. And if we're smart enough and have built them well enough, all that'll be left are the robots. Sort of like AI in the Kubrick movie, or the Kubrick-Spielberg movie AI, where the world is frozen and all that's left are the boy robot at the very end of the movie.
Well, yeah, look, robots and artificial intelligence may be one of the main vehicles and assets that we can deploy to help us get on top of climate change. By the way, I also want to mention, I've been talking, I've said philosophic dimension, there are philosophic dimensions to this. There are also religious dimensions to the consideration. And as a matter of fact, Robert Silverberg has basically both a very funny and profound story in Robots Through the Ages, Good News from the Vatican, in which the cardinals in the future are debating, should they choose an android or a robot to be the next pope? And, there's some strong arguments that are made on behalf of that. So that, again, is an example of robots and androids. And again, fiction tends to get more excited about deadly perils than it does about profoundly important assistance. But the reality might be that they might be more our helpers than our undoing. By the way, one of the things that I think it's important to keep in mind is, and this also gets back again to Marvin Minsky, a lot of the people, and I sort of alluded to this before, who actually do AI and actually help develop robots and androids have gotten their ideas from science fiction stories. And Marvin Minsky is one of the, along with Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, both said that they were most inspired to start doing their work after reading Isaac Asimov. And in the case of Krugman, it was the Foundation trilogy. In the case of Minsky, it was Asimov's Robot Stories. So, this discussion, that we're now having, I mean, the timing couldn't be better. Getting back to when Robots Through the Ages is coming out, if it had come out last summer, it still would be I think, incredibly enjoyable and exciting and fascinating anthology that it is. But in addition to that, now we have, as we've been discussing, AI in the news just about every day. And that's something that I think is important for us in terms of making the right decisions. But it's also something that, once again, shows the relationship between science fiction and real developments that spring from science fiction and are out there in the world.
And to go back to what you said about like the medical research they were doing, I mean, the AI itself was able to process data at a much faster rate than people were, thus cutting the amount of time to deal with something as serious as a brain tumor. And for the people who have brain tumors right now, this was probably great news, because it's that's a great benefit thing. So we've just been hearing about the negative aspects of it, and of course, I'm sure someone's going to use AI in the upcoming election to like spin things or like create things, and we're in the era where we're just entering of deep fakes, audio fakes, video fakes, like that. At the same time, Paul, we've mentioned Isaac Asimov several times. And Isaac Asimov is not in the table of contents on this. Was there a reason for that?
Yeah, I don't know the whole story, but the reason for it is Isaac Asimov is no longer alive. As are most of the obviously golden age, if not all the golden age authors. But the estate and the editors and publisher just couldn't come to terms about, getting
Honestly,
an
I think that's more. I kind of think that I thought it was more like he's such a giant in robot science fiction that it's towering over everything else. It would have overshadowed it, and I kind of like seeing, because everybody still remembers Isaac Asimov, but not everybody remembers Clifford Simak or Jack Williamson, or Lester Del Rey, and all those are important, right? Was it Lester Del Rey? No, it was. Oh, I forgot his name. Who wrote the original iRobot? It was. It's not George O. Smith. I forget. You know who did it.
Yeah, I do know.
Oh, good. You can't remember either. Good. I feel bad now.
We could use an AI to help us
remember. Was it Ian O'Binder?
Maybe.
Yeah.
but let me say, by the way, here's an important point. I think there's a good chance that there's going to be a second Robots Through the Ages volume at some point, in the future. Given, first of all, Robots Through the Ages, this initial volume has gotten some great reviews already. I expect all kinds of good things to spring from this. And I actually think that either in that future volume, or who knows, there might be a whole series of volumes. Sooner or later, there will be an Asimov story. But look, I'm glad you raised that point, because, putting together an anthology is far more than thinking about, well, which stories would I like in the anthology? You might come up with a perfect list, but then you have to go out and get the permissions of the people, and then obviously you have to decide what order the stories are going to be in. And by the way, I thought that Robots Through the Ages did an interesting thing. They started off with a news story, which is a very good idea, because it shows that this anthology is of the present, and then it goes back to Ambrose Bierce, and then from then on it continues with stories in the years and dates that they were written. And, at the end of the book, as you've probably seen, Brian Thomas Schmidt has put together a list of stories which he wished could have been included in this anthology, and for one reason or another weren't. And there you can see a nice tableau of what could be in future volumes.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I'm dying to see the cover art, because I just have the text, and do you know what the cover is supposed to look like?
Yeah, okay, I'll send you the cover art. You know why I sent you just the text and not the cover art? It's because I had been sending things out to various podcasters and radio stations, and the first time I did that, like a moron, I just said, okay, I attached, I have Robots Through the Ages. I didn't see it was Robots Through the Ages .jpeg, and so all they got was the cover, not the actual.
Oh, yeah, you know what? That happens all the time. Yeah, no, I feel your pain. I absolutely get it.
But I will, as soon as we get off, I'll send you the cover. It's a great cover. It shows a series of robots, moving through the ages, getting more and more, human-like. And whoever did that cover, I think it's a great cover. It's hard to capture in a still image evolution, and this does that very well.
We're talking with Paul Levinson, whose story Robinson Calculator is in the anthology Robots Through the Ages, which is a clever mix of newer writers and golden age science fiction writers. And the book will be released in July. And Paul, we're just about getting ready to wrap it up here. I'm already getting the Zoom countdown. I was really, really happy to play the radio play and to read this. What else is going on besides your appearance on WUSB tomorrow night, reviewing the third season of Picard with a cast of thousands? What else is going on in the life of Paul Levinson?
Well, first of all, nothing as exciting as being on your radio shows, for sure. But two things that I'm sure a lot of writers are doing this. I mentioned that it's real life and now Robinson Calculator have really come into the forefront of what I'm doing. And in the case of both of them, I am writing novels based on these shorter works. Now, in the case of It's Real Life, I have a short novel. It's about 45,000 words. I may end it there. I may continue writing. I'm not 100% sure which of those I'm going to do. I mean, I sort of like ambiguous, the lady or the tiger endings. So I might end this real life novel there and let the reader think about what's going to happen, or I might continue it. Robinson Calculator, I wrote the story and the novelette, and it ends obviously not in a conclusive way because it's hard to be conclusive when you're writing about robots. So just in the last week, I've started writing what is now the second chapter of what I expect to be the novel of Robinson Calculator. So I'm going to keep doing those things as well. As far as Radioland is concerned, as long as you ask me, I'll mention it. The BBC is doing a series of special programs on smartphones and cell phones. And one of my lesser known books, nonfiction book, is called just Cell Phone, which I published in 2003. I did a really extensive interview, in which we also wound up talking about Chat GPT and AI. So that's going to be broadcast sometime, I don't know, in the next month or two. I don't have the exact date.
On the BBC, on the BBC radio?
Yes. And I probably on some podcasts too.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're going to be talking with Paul tomorrow night, starting around 9:15 on Friday Night Freeform, along with Colleen Bennett, Roy Belquist, Mary Beth Rakowski, Michael Rizzo, and myself, and we're going to be discussing the third season of Star Trek Picard, which absolutely features robots.
Oh, yeah. He's Data is one of the all-time great robots.
I mean, I'm chomping at the bit to talk about it. I'm like holding it off for tomorrow. But I have things to say about Data. Not all complimentary either. So,
well, let's just give me a headline. Did you like the third season? I know we have different
I love
opinions.
the third season. I was never a fan of Data's. I'm not a fan of Pinocchio stories where Data's incredible and he does all these incredible things, but his greatest wish in the world is to be a frail human being with dandruff, and arthritis, and bladder infections, and whatnot, brain tumors. That's what he really wants to be. And I'm like, and I would always go crazy watching Star Trek The Next Generation with Data sitting at the computer console, pushing buttons. Oh, I think I lost you. Yeah, I think I lost Paul. I'm sorry, Paul. Or you froze up. Anyway, we will talk more about Data tomorrow, and but I want to give out the details for the book one last time. So it's Paul Levinson. PaulLev.com is the URL for Paul. You can go on Captain Phil's Planet. Oh wait, is he back? Are you back, Paul?
Yes, I'm back.
You froze up there for a second. I thought Zoom was kicking us out, but no, you just froze up there. Anyway, about Data real quick, and then because I think I literally have 3 minutes left.
Okay.
I always felt Data should be able to interface with the Enterprise's computer instead of he had to punch it in on the keyboard. Seems like it would have been a lot faster.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean interface? You think he has mental telepathy?
Yeah, I think he could. I think he could plug himself into the computer and just instead of he's sitting there like, yes, Captain, yes, sir, aye, Captain, warp factor 3, and punch it in, and then the guy down in the engine room rings the bell. It's just like it's so 19th century sailing. In the 24th century, it makes me a little nuts sometimes.
Well, I do agree with you. This is like an old standing thing about, and Star Trek, has been caught up in this. If you're writing about the future, can't you just have people talking and whatever it is around you, they'll pick it up? Do you have to type it in? And in the case of Data, as you point out, it's even, goes beyond that because, but I mean, what is he supposed to do? Stick his finger into the computer and somehow that basically...
Well, that's what he did with the Borg. He was able to interface with the Borg cube and blow it up, so, okay, so, I know. This is why you have to tune in Friday night, because there's going to be 5 of us or 6 of us. I haven't counted, and we're going to be going around and around like this. It's going to be a good time. Paul, always great to see you, my friend. And in 24 hours, I get to see you again. So
Great. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. And dude, I'm playing you out to your favorite song, "Welcome Up" by Paul Levinson.
Thank you.
Here on WUSB Stony Brook. Thanks again, Paul.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Hiding behind a raindrop, shyly opening her sweet milk chocolate eyes, sleepily peeking out from dreams 9 times her size. Welcome up. Stories below her window, she sees people puttering like pebbles on the street. Sunshine buttering the sidewalk neath their feet. Welcome up. Always reaching for the source, always reaching something lost. Gliding beyond the same drive, stars are clear as day, although it's just past noon. Moons are plentiful and every crow's in tune. Welcome up. Soaring above the sunbow, lights an avenue for worlds that may be found. Life is teeming there in every crazy sound. Welcome up. Always reaching for the source, always reaching what was lost. Riding until she can't stop. Never in reverse, a trip is set on zen. What is the universe and just where does it end? Welcome up. Where does it end? Where does it end? Where does it end?
The Light on Light Through podcast.
And I hope you enjoyed that interview. I have to say thank you to Captain Phil for ending the interview with my song, Welcome Up. That, of course, comes from my 2020 album, Welcome Up, Songs of Space and Time. And if you were listening carefully at the very beginning of the interview, you will hear or would have heard the instrumental remix of Welcome Up done by Cheeky CP and Q-Rock 639, also known as Laren Q. And the remix they did about a year or so ago of Welcome Up, so I hope you enjoyed that as well. You'll find links to all of these songs and many other relevant things in the show notes to this episode. And if you were listening carefully, actually you didn't have to listen carefully because Captain Phil and I talked about it a lot. you heard us mentioning something that's going to take place tonight at 9 p.m., also on WUSB, on another one of Captain Phil's shows. Captain Phil's going to interview me and a whole bunch of other people who are far more expert than I am about the Star Trek franchise, and in particular about Picard, the third season of which just ended last month. So if you're listening to this podcast today, on June 2nd, make sure you tune in to WUSB. You'll find a link to that as well in the show notes. And sometime in the next few days, I will certainly also put up on this podcast the full interview that will be taking place tonight about Star Trek. So lots of good things coming up on this podcast in the weeks and months ahead. Stay tuned, and in the meantime, stay safe, stay sound, and keep doing whatever you can to help those brave people of Ukraine get those Russian invaders out of their country once and for all.
The Light on Light Through podcast
Athens, 2042 AD. She ripped the paper in half, then ripped the halves, then ripped what was left again into bits and pieces of history that could have been. Sierra Waters had read once that, years ago, it was thought that men made love for the thrill, while women made love for the sense of connection it gave them.
Curled Up with a Good Book says, Sierra Waters is sexy as hell. You can find out more about The Plot to Save Socrates by Paul Levinson at theplottoSaveSocrates.com.
Paul Levinson spills code about an ancient biotech war raging on in secret for centuries.